Good to go, get started?
Yep.
We're rolling?
We're rolling.
Okay. Well, first of all, Tracy, I do want to thank you. You're a rock star for putting this together. This is our third year now, right?
Yes.
Every year it's gotten a little bigger and better. We're a little fancier setting now, going to the entire class. And I also want to thank the entire leadership committee put together. And I wrote down everybody's name because I knew I would remember everybody. But Kathy, Miriam, Ellen, William, Bill, Dan, Jim, Sherry, Tracy, Nat, Dennis, Melanie, and Jamie. Thank you all for putting this together. Really appreciate your support. It means a lot to me to come from the class, come from fellow classmates to support what we're doing. So let me get into some brief remarks I've prepared. I'm going to start with a number. I'm going to tell you a story, and then we're going to get into the Mac House. So the number, $219,000. $219,000 for one youth. $219,000 for one youth for 1 year. I want you to think about that number. That breaks down to $600 per day. Now I'm going to tell you a story, a true story. I'm going to call him Tom. Tom is a 5-year-old, was wearing some of the same dirty clothes that he had on for the past several days as his mom and stepdad went into their bedroom to get high. As a 5-year-old, he didn't know that they were using heroin at the time. He only knew that his mommy got really tired after going into the bedroom and couldn't complete her sentences. For his stepdaddy, it had the opposite effect. It'd be the only time he'd actually come out and begin to play with Tom and until the high wore off. As this young 5-year-old grew up, he began to upset him that his daddy and his mommy and his stepdaddy didn't have enough money to pay for rent, to pay for good shoes, or a mattress for him to sleep on, as they were getting evicted and moving from apartment to apartment across the city. By the time this young man I call Tom was 16 years old, he started feeling bad asking his mom to pay for things that he needed. And so he decided that he was going to drop out of high school in his sophomore year in high school and provide for himself by selling drugs to survive. And I think that I want to pause there because 95, if not 100% of our kids, what we've learned in the first 6 years that we've done this, there's a common thread in most of our young kids' stories, and that is of survival. That they're out on the corner selling drugs, doing what they need to do to survive. It's sadly sometimes the only form of income that's readily available. And they started doing this at ages that it's far too young for them to actually appreciate the dangers and the risks of what they're doing. Most of our young people report getting involved in this between the ages of 8 and 12 years old, which is clearly too young for them to actually appreciate the risks and dangers associated with what they're doing. And I think it's important to pause there because I think our country, our state, our county, the city of Chicago doesn't understand this. We have a 3-step recipe that we have been doing for decades that doesn't work. We arrest, we incarcerate, and then we permanently marginalize by way of felony conviction. And we continue to do this day after day, despite the fact that we know it's never worked. And every time we do it, we drive another young person deeper into the system, hoping to make our communities safer, despite the overwhelming data that shows that's not true. So rather than understand our young people's situation, demonstrate compassion for their struggle, we give them permanent felony convictions as early as 15 years old. And some of you were on my Facebook page last night. You know that I'm riling this morning from the latest 15-year-old that's going down with a felony conviction by which he'll be judged for the rest of his life, such that he won't be able to work for somebody like Burger King, which is insulting and ridiculous and oppressive. So we mark them for life during their adolescent years, making it impossible for them to gain lawful employment as they mature into adults. And the cycle of poverty and crime that we know exists in communities like Lawndale continues on to the next generation. It's immoral, it's extravagantly expensive, and it doesn't work. $219,000, that number I started out with, $600 a day. That's what it costs to incarcerate one minor at the Juvenile Detention Center right here in Cook County for 1 year. In adult facilities, it costs $86,861 per year to incarcerate one adult for 1 year. So this vicious, I say, 3-punch combination of arrest, incarcerating, and marginalizing is clearly not working because recidivism rates we know across the country vary somewhere between 60 to 80% in most jurisdictions. and meanwhile more cheaper and more effective forms of justice that focus on the restoration of the community and the minor. Recognizing crime as the complex problem that it is, they go underfunded, and we pour more and more dollars into the construction of more and more prisons and punitive measures and first responders. But we're here today because I think there's a bright light, and it's called the Lawndale Christian Mac House. So everybody has with you a little packet. Actually, you know what? I need one for myself to go with things. This Lawndale Christian Mac House, Dan, you are actually a part of the story and how this got started. Yes. The first part of the story was we put on a documentary in Lawndale called The House I Live In, which is a documentary about the failure of the war on drugs. It's a great documentary if you haven't seen it. And a hedge fund manager, a person who was interested in what we do and had some financial wherewithal, was interested in what I had to say afterwards. We did a panel afterwards. He came over to the legal center. We met. We started talking. And I learned during that conversation that he started a nonprofit about 10 years ago called the Mac House. And MAC is the initials for his brother who actually died in the Iraq War. He was a doctor, I believe, in the military. And so they started a nonprofit in his honor. And they said that they partner with nonprofit organizations to provide housing services for other nonprofits' constituents, or if you will, or the people that nonprofit serves. They traditionally partnered with folks who are domestic violence victims, women and their children who needed housing. We, at that point, then kind of just started discussing that we had this idea many years ago, but didn't think we could get it off the table, to do a residential program for our youth that would focus on mental health and employment. And so we started talking about that. He loved the idea, and he, I think, intuitively understood that a job makes all the difference in the world. And so then we started talking about doing a residential program for our youth that would focus on job training. And that's when Dan Johnson comes into the story. Out of nowhere, I remembered that we had breakfast about 2 years ago, the breakfast you convened downtown. And Mark Polis was at that breakfast, and he had always stuck out in my mind because, as you know, he's a very impressive individual, very charismatic individual, and a lifer in the union. And one of the things he had said at that breakfast was a random grouping of people that Dan just decided to bring for breakfast. I'm still not sure why you brought me, but I'm glad you did. And he said that I'm from the local 150, and we have a hard time getting minority representation into our union. And I tucked that away, and then sure enough, about a year ago now, after I had met with Jack, I decided to give Mark a random phone call. It was right about the time that we had lunch with Monty, if you remember, the lawyer. And sure enough, in typical Mark fashion, got really excited. He's like, hey, let's have coffee. Started talking. Next thing you know, the local 150's on board. And this turned into a partnership with the Mac House and the local 150, which is the union for the heavy equipment operators. When I say they got on board, they have been coming out to our monthly meetings. They've been on countless conference calls with me. They have really invested a lot of time and energy into what we're doing here. So what are we doing? The program actually begins in about a week, right, Larry? Yes. Larry Kimbrough is our project manager. We just hired him 2 days ago. This is day 3 for him. Larry's from the neighborhood. He's a contractor that is a tradesman. He knows how to buy and rehab homes and do a bunch of trade stuff that I don't even pretend I know it about. But he also has a combination of that and wanting to do youth development. And I actually met Larry first time about 5 years ago when he was mentoring some of the kids that I was representing. And I knew him to be a very committed mentor. I didn't know that he was a general contractor that buys homes in Lawndale and rehabs them. When I got his resume, I thought, holy cow, let's get Larry in. So very pleased to say that we hired Larry, and that he's on board, and he's been doing great in just the 2 days that we've been together. So what we're doing is we're buying homes. We're still in the process of buying those homes. We have our ideal settings identified. The local 150 is walking us through the application process beginning in October, in just a week, all the way through May of 2016 with the goal of getting about 4 to 6 of our kids into the local 150 union. We're starting with just the local 150. Why? Because it's the only guy I know that's in the union, and he came to the table. I mean, you start with who you know, right? And Mark is a fascinating and impressive individual, as I said, and he's been all in. So what Mark has also shared with us, Mark Polis, is that he is willing to, when we succeed in doing this, take this program to all of his other friends from other unions so that in future years what we can say is recruit kids to come into the MAC house, what we're calling the Lawndale Christian MAC house, say here are different training tracks to get into this union, local 150, here's a training track to get into the electrical, to the carpentry. So we want to have a buffet, but to get there we need to do this one well. We have to do this one right first. So we're starting small. We only want to work with 4 to 6 kids. We're starting with 20 that are going to take the union exam or application this October. And then the union is going to look at their scores, assess them, strengths and weaknesses, and work with Larry and myself to put together a individualized training program from October all the way to May of 2016, where it's going to be a combination of apprenticeships and trainings and certifications offered in Chicago, like 11-week courses, 8-week courses in welding and carpentry and all these other things, coupled with on-the-site work experience. So we have a bunch of tradesmen that are working with us, a lot of different organizations in Lawndale who are going to be working on-site with our kids, bringing our kids out there during this next 8-month period to get them on-the-job experience while they're getting trainings. With the goal of, in May of 2016, they'll do the final step of getting the union, which is a 2-week site visit. Once they do that, then they're in the union. Now, to give you a big picture of what that means, 3,000 people on average apply to the local 150 every year. They take, what they've estimated last year, they took about the top 140. So we've got to get our kids who are going to take the exam this October. They're going to rate and rank them 1 to 3,000. And then through the ongoing work of training, they get to supplement their application and bump up their rate and ranking, and we need to get them in the top 150. That's the mission ahead of us. And I'm very optimistic it's going to happen because Mark Polis and the union are on board with showing us the exam, telling us exactly what they need to do to get their score up. So they're going to lay it out in a way that we just set the milestones and then run it out. So that kind of in a nutshell is what the MAC house, Lawndale Christian MAC house is. We want to expand, as I said, to include other unions. We're hoping to buy another home from the existing property we have to then rehab that home so the first kids can move into that, and then a new group of kids next year can move into the first home that we have kids in, so that it ever kind of perpetuates and grows. But I want to go back really quickly to the young 19-year-old that I shared with you that I called Tom. Our attorneys, this was before MAC house, this was before we had this on the radar, but we have always had a jobs program, a tiered jobs program, where we have Tier 1 employment, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 is where we employ the kids to work on site, on our mock trial program, building maintenance, after school program, student leaders, and a community garden on site. But we pay them about $10 an hour to work on site. Tier 2 is where we then pay them to work for a partnering employer. And while they work for the employer, we foot the bill. We ask them to have a supervisor, train them, and then if a opportunity opens up, then we ask them to let them put in a resume and interview for that position. So Tier 3 then is that company would actually hire them. So this young 19-year-old Tom, as we were representing him in court, he was charged with a non-probational Class 1 felony for selling drugs within 1,000 feet of a church. If convicted, that means he would do 4 to 15 years in jail, minimum 4, maximum 15. One of our case managers began working with them. Our volunteer coordinator set up a mentor with them. Our after-school program began reaching out to him. And our workforce development staff began putting him through the job program with Tier 1 employment and Tier 2 employment and Tier 3. And I mention him because he went through Tier 1 employment with us through our building maintenance. Then he went into a Tier employment with Tier 2, with the local movie theater. And then that movie theater ended up hiring him. And I remember I interviewed him to see what this job meant to him. And it was like one of those moments of many moments in my life in the last 6 years where I learned something rather, I think, profound. And I asked him, well, what does it mean to have a job now? And his shoulders, he literally sighed. And he went, I know I don't have to go out on the corner and sell drugs anymore. And it was a moment for me because I honestly thought that our kids didn't really actually understand the risks they were taking. Now, he's a 19-year-old, so he's a little bit older than our 13, 14, 15-year-olds. But it was a moment for me because I realized he actually understood that what he was doing doesn't work. He knew that he could get shot, he knew that he could get robbed, and he knew that he's likely going to get arrested, and anything he makes out there isn't going to be sustainable. And he tells me that he said, it feels good, I cash my own check, and I don't ask for anything anymore. And he did that on a job that was making $9 an hour at a movie theater. That's all it took for him to start thinking, to get out of survival, and start thinking about a longer-term future where he wanted to go back to school, get drug treatment, and set goals, go on to college and become a counselor or psychologist. And that was with what I would say our jobs program light. This was not that's where we started with our jobs program, it's not where we want to end. So this Lawndale Christian MAC house is going to hopefully take us to a much bigger employment program, workforce development program. If you're not familiar with the union, I'll just end by saying what the pay day looks like. Once you get into the union, they have a 5-year apprenticeship, and year 1 as an apprentice, May of 2016, 4 to 6 kids will start making 25 bucks an hour doing heavy equipment operating, mostly building the highways, as an apprentice, never having operated a piece of equipment in their life. Year 2, they go $32 an hour, then $37 an hour, $45 an hour, up to $50 an hour as a tradesman. When I tell the kids about this, their eyes light up, because that's money, that's real money, and that's more money than they or their families have ever made. When we take them down to the Wilmington Training Facility, which is a huge 300-acre facility, I call it like a sandbox with Tonka toys, and just blow it up. We went down there a couple months ago, put on some hard hats. I got in there with in a little cab backhoe, was digging in this warehouse. Our kids got in there, was digging in the warehouse. All of them came back, and they've been talking about it ever since. I think this is the best thing, and I think we've done a lot of good things. This is the best thing that we're doing right now. This is all kind of coming together with one other problem that we've had at the Legal Center that I'll share really briefly, and then I'll kick it out for some Q&A. I don't know if you guys know this, but we started with $30,000 of a budget. One staff member is yours truly. Now we have 17 full-time staff. We have close to an $800,000 budget, and we have already overgrown the building that we started in. So we've been joking around in the office that we need to do bunk desks, which is completely unsafe and probably illegal, and I'm sure I'd be sued. But we need a new space, and there's a space on Central Park in Ogden called the Harambe Building that would fit all of our office, all of our staff, our current programming, but it also has a warehouse and apartments all in the same building. I'm taking Larry on a tour of it today at 4, Danae as well, she hasn't seen it. But it would be the great location for us to relocate everybody. We'd have enough office space for all of our programs, current programs, and we'd be able to expand with Lawndale Christian Mac House with a warehouse on site that the kids could tinker with some new toys on days where they need training. So again, I just want to say thank you for being here and supporting this. Everything we raise today is going to go toward the Lawndale Christian Mac House program specifically, and as you can see in the little pamphlet we've got here, the budget is daunting. I said we've got a $800,000 budget right now for the Legal Center. You can see we've got to double that to make this program work. Now that will include the capital campaign to buy this building and relocate the Lawndale Christian Legal Center. So it's the $500,000 to buy this property, thereabouts. That's an estimate at this point. We're getting an appraisal done this week. That really is a Lawndale Christian Legal Center expense, not just a Mac House expense.